Is it better to work in New Zealand or Australia as a doctor? I have worked in New Zealand as a junior doctor for 4 years now and recently have just moved to Australia. I thought I'd give an honest review. Given that I've now worked in both places, I would try answer it by comparing the differences between the two health systems, training opportunities, work hours, paycheck, work-life balance. So whether you're an IMG or a Kiwi doctor like myself thinking about moving to Australia, I hope this video is useful for you. And for a bit of context, and for those of you guys who are new here, my name is Eunice and I used to be based in Christchurch in New Zealand, and in May this year I have decided to move to Sunshine Coast, which is the sunny paradise in Queensland. Most of you guys would know it's been a hot minute since I've last published a video, so getting back into this has been not as easy as I thought it would have been, but I thought this is a good opportunity to make a video since I've been here for 4 months to compare and contrast the two. I haven't got a studio set up, I've just got this sort of makeshift beanbag and I have my tablet here to have a look at my very comprehensive notes, so don't mind me if I'm looking down. It's because there's a lot of information I want to cover and I don't want to miss anything. People always ask me, why move to Australia? Why not stay in New Zealand? So I moved to Australia mainly because of the weather, because it's freaking cold in Christchurch. Australia is a bigger country in general and it has better currency, more opportunities, I guess. I thought that moving here as well, I would have better training opportunities, but I was very wrong about that. I'm going to address that when I talk about training later on in the video, so make sure you keep watching. It was just something that I didn't expect. Let's cover the health systems in New Zealand versus Australia. I do want to preface that New Zealand is literally 4 hours flight away from Australia, most of Australia anyway, in the East Coast. Things aren't that different. The culture particularly is very similar. Most of the time I even forget that I've moved to Australia just because, like there's not a very noticeable difference working here. It's only when I start hearing people saying like six that I remember, oh yeah, Aussie accent. But the health systems itself, I think the main difference is the amount of money that the government is willingly putting into one health system over the other. A really great example is in Christchurch Hospital. The new part of the hospital was proposed to be built in 2011. It didn't get done until 2020 and it's not completed yet. There's like a second part of the new hospital that's meant to be built at the same time, but it's not done yet. So that's taken at least 10 years and ongoing. Whereas the hospital I'm working at now, Sunshine Coast University Hospital, it literally took 4 years from planning to finishing. It's a brand new hospital and it's really, really damn flash. I would say that Australian hospitals, there are a lot more of them in proportion to the population. Because Australia obviously have a bigger population than New Zealand. But besides the size, I also think that the hospitals are way better staffed. A very stark comparison that I could use is general medicine. In Christchurch Hospital, you'd be lucky to have one registrar and one health officer or resident on your team. With RDOs and things, they don't really send people to relieve you. Same in Australia. Here in Queensland, in Sunshine Coast especially, in the general medicine team, the structure is that you have one registrar, one resident, and one intern. So intern is PGY1, resident is PGY2. Back at home is intern PGY1. I've noticed that's a big difference. What else is there? I also thought that with the equipment and computers, there's just a lot more of them. In Australia, health system is set up in a way that if you're earning like a decent amount of money, the government charge you $2,000, like if you don't have a private insurance. But if you have private insurance, that's waived, and private insurance yearly is usually $2,000 anyway. So it's sort of not rocket science that most people in Australia have private insurance, and because of that, there is an incentive for lots of private health work. So because of that, the workload for the public system is also reduced. Lots of patients, if they turn up at the public hospital's emergency department, the first thing they check is, do you have private health? And if they do, then they are eligible to use that in the setting that there are actually beds in those private hospitals. So that's very different to New Zealand because we hardly have any private hospitals in New Zealand. So the public hospitals are heaving. heaving, I tell you. Because of like private health and because it's like a bigger hospital, I feel that in Australia there's a lot of paperwork, lots of hoops that you have to jump through in order to get something. Like, for example, a medication is only publicly funded if it meets certain criteria. If it's slightly off-label, like for example, if you want to chart Paxlovid for an extra day or an extra 2 or 3 days, you have to find research paper in order to support your decision making, and then it takes a whole lot of time off one of your juniors to go do like a piece of paperwork that can take half an hour to an hour to complete, and it has to go through this director of whatever to get confirmed. There's a lot of paperwork and politics, I feel, in Australia compared to New Zealand, where things are a lot more laid back and not that much regulation and restrictions around how you want to practice medicine, which is good and bad, I guess. As I said, Australia is better funded, which also means that there are a lot more things that Australia has access to in terms of medications, chemotherapy, top of the line immunotherapy, things that New Zealanders just don't have access to. And I would much rather receive medical treatment in Australia compared to New Zealand because of that. Let's talk about work hours and OT and things, because this is probably my favorite part of the video because the difference is just massive, huge, and no wonder people come here. So I would like to preface that in Australia, you're contracted to work 76 hours per fortnight only, which averages to be about 38 hours per week. Long days here are only 12 hours max compared to 15 hours back at home. Now, I can't speak for other specialties, but this is certainly true for medical registrars as well as RMOs working in Queensland. In New Zealand, I also used to work 30-hour weekends, and that's just unheard of in Australia. So when I told my colleagues about these shifts, they were like, "You what?" Yeah, without the comparison, I didn't think that they were all that bad. They were pretty tiring. And especially on the Sunday, working your second day shift, by like 1 p.m, my brain was pretty much already fried because just tired and not enough mental capacity to really be making good, sound decisions, in my opinion. Literally, in the New Zealand Te Whatu Ora with the RDA union clause, it says that you cannot be rostered or required to work more than 16 hours a day or 72 hours in a 7-day period, or rostered more than 140 hours in a 14-day period. But in Australia, you're contracted to work 76 hours per fortnight, and then anything else extra is all overtime. Wow. I think that's sort of like a mic drop already in that statement itself. I've also noticed that workload intensity in Australia is a lot less, possibly because I have more staffing around me to support me. But, for sure, some of the rotations are tougher than others. On a post-take day, it might be busier, you might finish a bit later, but it's all good. You just claim for overtime. You're compensated for your work. Whereas overtime in New Zealand, it's not a thing there. The reason behind that is each rotation that you go through in the hospital has a category assigned to it. It's categorized by the number of hours that they expect you to be working per day. So like category F is like 40 hours. Category A is something like 65 hours plus per week. When I was working as a PGY1, end of PGY1 in gastro and hepatology, I was working as the sole RMO on that rotation, which meant that I was getting paid category A, which is a lot more than my colleagues who are in category C, for example, doing general medicine. I'd be staying till 6 p.m. every single day, and I wasn't allowed to complain because the run description is that you should be working those hours per week and you're rightly compensated for that, which I don't think should be the way to go because you don't really get to choose your rotations anyway. Gastro probably wasn't even my first choice. I would rather go home on time and not get paid category A or get paid overtime, because who wants to spend 10 hours plus every day at work? I would much rather that they just hire one extra person. Everyone can go home on time, and also that there is no burnout or fatigue for that single RMO. And there's just like room to make more mistakes when you're tired too. On the topic of money, the biggest question that I'm sure all of you are thinking about is, do Australian doctors make more than New Zealand doctors? Yeah, 100%. That's no doubt about that. And I'm going to pull out some graphs for you later on. If we make a fair comparison where over here, as I say, you're contracted to work 38-hour work week, technically in New Zealand, that puts you down to a category F. You can see that at every single stage of being a doctor, you're getting paid a lot more being an Australian doctor. And that doesn't really cover overtime either. In saying that though, in Australia, there are some downsides in that the health system or the hospital or the DHB, they don't reimburse you for things like training fees or registration fees. They do quickly add up. So, for example, APRA, which is medical registration, is $1,000 every year. And when you first sign up, it's $2,000. Training program for physician training, $3.5K a year. Exams is another $4K if you pass it first go. Not to mention things like, study materials and courses. So those fees are recurring each year and they're not covered. But back in New Zealand, they are all reimbursed. The other thing that I really was not grateful enough for, looking back now, is that New Zealand hospitals, back in Christchurch anyway, they cover your food, your lunches, your dinners. If you're on a long day, both meals. I just didn't realize how much packing lunch can be such a hassle. Like, it's just one extra thing to think about when you finish work and come home and like, oh, I need to pack lunch for the next day. So in New Zealand, everyone goes to lunch. It's a nice way to also meet up with the rest of your colleagues who are in different rotations. You catch up at lunch and see how everyone's doing. I really think that that's what Australians are missing out on. But a really great thing that over here Australia offers is salary packaging. It's not just limited to being a doctor. I think other careers also have this. Salary packaging, my understanding is that if you sign up to it, they can take a chunk of your salary, pre-tax money, to pay for certain things that you apply for. So you can say, I need some money to pay rent or pay your mortgage or pay your parking. That money just gets sent to your account. So rather than using your post-tax salary to pay for those expenses, you're using pre-tax money, which is great because that saves you quite a bit of money too. I think let's talk about training and the opportunities as well as competition here in Australia versus in New Zealand. Remember how initially I told you that coming here would improve my training opportunity, it being on par, but I was really mistaken. Yeah. I'll tell you why. I am in RACP, which is the Royal Australasian Physician Training Program. So I emphasize Australasian. So that's Australia, New Zealand. It's supposed to be the same training program here and in New Zealand. So I'm in BPT2 already in training. But for some reason, moving across from New Zealand to Australia, I still need to reapply to get onto training in Australia. They were telling me that each hospital is only allocated a certain number of training positions. So at the time when I applied to start work at school, they didn't have any BPT positions, basically. The applications for next year would open in June, but I'd have to apply to sit the exam with all the other PGY2s who are trying to get onto PPT, which is just a bit ridiculous because I'm in my second year training, already in the training program. So it's just stuff like that, like politics, needing to sit an assessment. And these assessments are skis. So it's those stations where you showcase your clinical skills, which I understand if you're not on the training program yet. Anyway, I rest my case. Back in New Zealand, when I wanted to join the physician training program, everyone's like welcoming you with open arms because no one wants to be a medical registrar. There wasn't limited positions per se in Christchurch Hospital, I guess, because there are more people here, it's more competitive, or they make it seem like it's more competitive. There's this whole process that you need to get through. And by the time that you get on to the program as well, they check in with you every year and they're like, so when are you going to sit exams? When are you going to sit exams? So there's a lot of pressure to be focused on progression and getting through your exams. I feel like they do really emphasize on teaching, especially at this hospital I'm working at anyway. There's compulsory physician training teaching that happens twice a week, I think. So at lunchtime as well as at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning pre-work, so it mandates you to go and they take attendance. In New Zealand, no such thing. If you can come to teaching, great. If you can't, that's on you, that you take responsibility for your own grades, I suppose. So I think they really do prep you for these exams, or try to prep you for them anyway. I don't really want to share this particularly because it's kind of shameful, but I thought that you guys should know about this information. So I recently wanted to apply for GP training here, which is general practice training. And this was the second intake, so it is more competitive than the first intake anyway. I was unsuccessful and I couldn't get on. There were only 20 positions, training positions available in the area that I wanted to apply to. They were using an online test that kind of looks at your ethical value rather than clinical experience to assess whether or not you're a suitable candidate. So they don't even look at your references either or your CV. It's called the Casper aptitude test. So I didn't do very well at all. So I didn't get on. I definitely would have gotten on if I was applying in New Zealand, because there's such a shortage in New Zealand for GPs, and there is no assessments to try get on. Sort of you apply to have a look at your CV, potentially an interview. I don't think there is, and on you get. No, it's pretty straightforward. Over here, it seems like there is competition for even things that are supposedly easiest to get onto, if that makes sense. Physician training, for example, and GP training. If that applies to those easier to get on training programs, it's not hard to imagine how much more competitive it is for specialty trainings that are already competitive, known to be competitive, like radiology, surgical training, dermatology, for example. So something to think about, but I'm still going to apply next year and see how I go. It's not like I'm not earning good money while I'm here, but obviously a little bit disappointing, and I feel like I need to wait another year and feel a little bit behind with my training and progression. Yeah. Let's talk about work culture and what my colleagues are like. Again, I can only speak about the hospitals that I've worked at, which is SCU and Christchurch Hospital. I think different hospital will have its own vibe, of course, because it's made up of different people. And for SCU, because it's such a young hospital, I think it's only been open for about 7 years. People who work there are younger doctors, and because of that, I think they're quite open to new suggestions, open to new ways of practicing, just a bit more open-minded and approachable in general, and also quite laid back. And I found that there are a lot more part-time doctors, consultants, than I'd expected. Just because in New Zealand and Christchurch especially, I don't think that they really want to contract part-time physicians. They would just much rather have a full-timer. So that's one big thing to think about. Whereas Christchurch Hospital, it's been around for a long, long time. So there are some really great structures that are already set in stone, which means the workflow is very smooth, very easy to just plug yourself into the system. But the average age of doctors in Christchurch are pretty old. They have lots of experience, but yeah, they're a lot older. I also feel like the hierarchy seems to feel a bit more rigid, and possibly because I trained there as a medical student as well. Maybe that's why I feel like the bosses are so distant. Everyone's been really lovely in Australia, and as well as New Zealand, I had great colleagues, and everyone's just really willing to help you out. I found both places really lovely to work, and I do miss Christchurch Hospital. I'm only going to briefly touch on cost of living. All I'm going to say is the cost of living in Sunshine Coast is much, much higher than in Christchurch. Everything's basically doubled. It might be because I grew up in Christchurch, so I have a lot of things already, and I have my parents' place as well, so I can always go back and thief off them. In Sunshine Coast, we're getting a lot of new things. We just got a brand new car, and the rental here is expensive because we rented the whole place. So a lot of those things add up. Sunshine Coast is more expensive than the rest of Australia though, so it's probably not a fantastic representation of living in Australia. I think the rental is even cheaper if you go essentially to Brisbane, for example. But if you would like to hear the breakdown of what it looks like compared to New Zealand, I do have a spreadsheet if you would like to watch something like that. let me know in the comments below. I reckon the main differences between the two is that Australia is bigger, but it involves more paperwork. It pays better, but you have to work on your own taxes and they don't help you pay your admin fees. It's also more competitive for training and they don't provide free food. But you know what they say? Choose where you want to live, not where you want to work. Because work's going to be work no matter where you go. It's where you want to spend money that you've earned at work to live your life. Being here after 4 months, I do enjoy it. I am enjoying my time outside of work as well because I finish on time. And if I'm not on time, I'm getting paid overtime. So that feels pretty good to stay at work if I really have to. And I'm feeling well rested. I feel like I've got more time outside of work to do things like filming. Yeah, I'm just a bit bummed that I didn't get onto training, but I'm just going to try again. In the next video, I'm going to talk more about money, salary, and go through my paychecks with you. So if you are interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below to let me know what else you would like me to cover in the next video.